Hello, and welcome to another episode of Teen Talk, Politics Made Simple. I'm your host, Mallory Hinck, and today we're diving into one of the most important parts of American government, Congress. Now, I know it sounds like a lot, but stick with me because we're going to break it all down so that it all makes sense. By the end of this episode, you'll understand the roles of the House of Representatives, the Senate, and how bills actually become laws. Plus, we'll touch on some cool stuff like pocket vetoes, filibusters, and why bills are so hard to pass. So sit back, grab a snack, and let's get into it. Let's start with the basics. Congress is the name for the legislative branch of the United States government. In simple terms, it's the group that makes laws for the country. But there's a catch. Congress isn't just one big group, it's actually two separate parts called chambers. We have the House of Representatives and the Senate. Together, they make up what we call a bicameral legislature. Bicameral just means two parts. The reason we have two chambers is partly because of the way the United States Constitution was designed to balance power. The House of Representatives represents the people more directly, while the Senate represents the states. We're going to talk about each one of these in more detail, but just know that together, the House and the Senate form Congress and have to work together to pass laws. Let's start with the House of Representatives. The House is made up of 435 members, and each one represents a specific part of the country, known as a district. So if you live in, say, California's 25th district, your representative is someone who was elected to speak for the people who live in that area. The number of representatives each state gets is based on population. So California, with its large population, has a lot of representatives, currently 52. But states with fewer people, like Wyoming, only get one representative. Every 2 years, all 435 seats in the House are up for election. So you could have new members every time, which means the House is always changing with the will of the people. The representatives from New Hampshire, for example, are Chris Pappas and Annie Kuster. The House tends to be more focused on laws that directly affect people's everyday lives, like taxes, healthcare, and education. Because members of the House are elected for only 2-year terms, they're often a little more in tune with what voters want in the short term. So if there's any issue that's really important to people, you might see the House move quickly to address it. Now let's talk about the Senate. The Senate is a bit different from the House. First, there are only 100 senators, and each state gets exactly 2 senators, no matter how big or small the state is. That means whether you're from Alaska or California, you'll get the same number of senators representing you in the Senate. But how does it really work? Let's break it down. So, a bill starts when a member of either the House or the Senate introduces it. This could be a congressman, a senator, or even sometimes a group of them. They'll write up a proposal for a new law or an amendment to an existing law. Once they have the bill, it gets a name and a number, and it's sent to a committee. Committees are small groups of Congress members who specialize in certain areas, like healthcare, education, or defense. They're the first ones to look at the bill in detail, holding hearings and deciding whether or not it should move forward. If the committee likes the bill, it will go back to the full House or Senate to be debated. In the House, debates are usually more structured because they have more members, while the Senate has freedom to debate things however they'd like. If the bill passes in one chamber, it moves over to the other chamber. So if it started in the House, it'll go to the Senate, and vice versa. If both chambers agree on the bill, it goes up to the president. The president can sign the bill into law, veto it, or do something called a pocket veto, which we'll get into in a second. Okay, so you might be wondering what happens if the president doesn't like the bill. Well, the president has the power to veto a bill. A veto is basically the president saying, nope, I don't want this bill to become a law. But the president can't just veto anything. The Congress can actually override a veto if both the House and the Senate agree to it with a 2/3 vote. That's a pretty high bar, though, and it doesn't happen very often. To put that into perspective, that would require around 360 members of Congress to agree and vote on this bill. Now, here's something that might sound a little strange: the pocket veto. A pocket veto happens when the president doesn't sign a bill into law, but also doesn't officially veto it. Instead, the president just lets the bill sit on their desk for 10 days without signing it. If Congress is still in session, the bill automatically becomes a law. But if Congress has already adjourned, then the bill dies, and that's a pocket veto. It's a way for the president to stop a bill from becoming law without having to make a big public announcement about it. Now let's talk about something a little more exciting: filibusters. Filibusters are a special tactic used in the Senate to delay or block a vote on a bill. The idea behind a filibuster is pretty simple. Senators use it to talk and talk and talk until everyone gets tired and the vote gets delayed or canceled. In theory, it's about making sure there's enough time for debate, but in practice, it's often used to prevent a bill from even passing. The key about filibusters is that they don't always have to be about what's being debated. A senator can keep talking about pretty much anything, as long as they don't sit down. You might remember some famous filibusters, like when Senator Strom Thurmond spoke for over 24 hours straight in 1957 to block civil rights legislation. To end a filibuster, the Senate needs a vote for cloture, which is a process that limits debate and forces a vote. But getting cloture is tough. It takes 60 votes, which is a supermajority, and that's not always easy to get. Filibusters are a huge part of Senate politics. They can really slow down the legislative process. Even the threat of a filibuster is enough to kill a bill. So you might be thinking, okay, this all sounds like a lot of work, but why does it even matter to me? Well, the way Congress works affects your life more than you might realize. Whether it's healthcare, the environment, or education, the laws Congress passes impact nearly everything. And when we understand how bills move through Congress, we can better understand why some issues get attention while others don't. Plus, if you're interested in making a change, knowing how the system works gives you the tools to get involved. Whether that's by voting, contacting your representatives, or even running for office one day, your voice matters in the process. Now, it's time to dive into why it's so hard to get a bill passed in Congress. Even though Congress is supposed to make the laws of the land, the reality is that passing a bill is like trying to push a boulder up a mountain. It is slow, it's tough, and it can feel like it's never going to happen. But why? Why is it so complicated? First things first, as we've already discussed, a bill is a proposal for a new law, or even a change to an existing one. But here's the thing. Just because someone has a good idea doesn't mean it's automatically going to become a law. There's a huge process that any bill has to go through to make it to the final stage, which is being signed by the president, as we've already discussed. And trust me, the process isn't as easy as it might sound. The path from an idea to law is filled with obstacles, debates, votes, and a lot of waiting around. So why is that? Well, there are a few reasons that we're going to walk through today. One of the biggest reasons it's so hard to pass a bill is the political game going on behind the scenes. When you think about Congress, don't just imagine a bunch of people in suits debating over bills. Congress is full of politics, power struggles, and let's face it, partisanship. You've got two major political parties in the U.S., the Democrats and the Republicans, and, for the most part, they don't always agree on much. So, right off the bat, if a bill is introduced by one party, the other party might be less likely to support it, even if the bill is a great idea. Here's an example. Let's say a Democratic Congress member introduces a bill to combat climate change, which involves some new government regulations. A Republican Congress member might oppose it simply because they don't like the idea of more government control. Even if parts of the bill are popular, or even if it makes sense, the political parties will often oppose each other out of principle, just because of their political beliefs. This partisanship means that bills don't just need a majority to pass, they need bipartisan support. That means you need support from both sides of the aisle, and that can be tough to get. Without support, many bills get stuck before they even reach the floor for debate. Now let's talk about committees. Before a bill even makes it to the floor of the House or the Senate for debate, it has to go through a committee. Committees are the smaller groups of Congress that we previously discussed that specialize in certain areas. Now, imagine that there are hundreds of new bills every year. If every bill had to be debated by the entire House or Senate, nothing would ever get done. So instead, they send the bills to committees to focus on specific topics. Each committee explains the bill, holds hearings, and makes changes to it. Here's the problem. Not all bills get through committees. Some bills just get stuck there because committee members don't want to deal with them, or they don't even think it's worth debating. This is called killing a bill in committee. Even if a bill has a lot of support from regular people or from other parts of Congress, if the committee doesn't think it's important or if there's too much disagreement with the committee, the bill might not even ever make it out of there. So before a bill even reaches the House or Senate floor for debate, it has to survive the committees. If it gets stuck in one, that's one less step closer to becoming a law. Even when a bill makes it out of committee and to the floor of the House or Senate, it still has to go through several rounds of voting and debate. And that's not a smooth process either. In the House, things can move pretty quickly because they have more members, so debates are often shorter and more structured. But in the Senate, things can take a little long. Senators can filibuster, as we previously discussed, introduce amendments, which are small changes to the bill, or even delay the vote for personal or political reasons. Here's where it gets tricky. A bill might pass in one chamber of Congress, say the House, but then get stuck in the Senate, or vice versa. If the two chambers can't agree on the exact wording of a bill, it might have to go back and forth between the House and the Senate for months until they can reach a compromise. This is called a conference committee. But remember, each chamber has to vote on the bill in the exact same form for it to move forward. So it's not just about getting a bill voted on in one place. It has to pass in both the House and the Senate. And even after all that work, there's still the president to think about. Now, let's talk about the final boss of the bill passing process, the president. After a bill passes through both the House and the Senate, it goes to the president for approval, as we previously discussed. Congress can still pass the bill, but they need a two-thirds vote in both chambers to override the veto, roughly 360 people. This is incredibly difficult to do, so a veto can often stop a bill dead in its tracks. So, after everything, the debates, the votes, the compromises, there's still a chance that the president can stop a bill from becoming law. You might be wondering, why does this matter? Why is it so hard to get anything done in Congress? Well, the simple answer is that our democracy was designed to be slow. The founders of our country didn't want laws to be passed on a whim or without careful consideration. But that slow process also means that good ideas can get blocked by politics, partisanship, and bureaucracy. It's frustrating, right? But here's the thing. It's supposed to be hard to pass laws. Otherwise, our elected officials could go crazy and invent a new law every hour. That's a wrap for today's episode of Teen Talk. I hope this cleared up how Congress, the House, and the Senate work and how bills make their way into laws. Stay curious and keep learning.